This is 50 Greatest Documentaries. The television documentary reflects and teaches us about the world we live in. Some have even changed it. They tell real stories that can fill us with wonder, shame, or anger. Recent big-screen documentaries like Fahrenheit 9/11 and Super Size Me have shown the hunger for these films, the questions they pose, and the debates they start. They all tell stories with vitality, humanity, and humour. We asked a panel of factual filmmakers to choose their favourite programmes of all time. Tonight we will feature their 50 greatest documentaries. At number 50, it's When Louis Met Jimmy. When Michael Moore's former researcher Louis Theroux stepped in front of the camera to make his own documentaries, little did he realise that interviewing living legend Jimmy Savile would be his toughest challenge yet.
Telephone rings, and it says, BBC Two here. Louis Theroux says that he would like to do. I said, who's he?
There were lots of things Jimmy didn't want to talk about, and in a normal documentary, that would be a problem. So you don't have a wife and family?
No, none whatsoever.
Really?
None whatsoever. I'll leave that to other people.
Why?
Haven't the faintest idea.
Yeah. Our technique in that, such as it was just to film everything that happened.
And he was with me for 8 weeks, would you believe?
We're going to keep him going until he's exhausted and the mask comes off and we just see a little bit of who is the person behind the cigar and the tracksuit. Is that advisable to smoke while you're exercising?
No.
Jimmy just wanted to take control. And we thought that this was hugely problematic because he wouldn't let his guard down and there was this constant battle, who was going to be in charge of the film.
I never saw it as a battle because I don't do a battle with everybody or anybody because they lose and I win. It's a lot easier to make negative TV shows than it is to make positive ones. And if we are doing nice things and good things and happy things, imagine how many millions of people you will cheer up.
I needed to stop him and impede him and kind of be more aggressive than I'd ever been, in anything that I'd done before. Do you mean to say that you've never, ever had a girlfriend?
Never.
I don't believe it.
You've just told me I've not.
I don't believe it.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't
what an
believe
untrustworthy
it.
person.
I don't believe it.
Louis, I think, is two people. One is a simple, straight, nice soul. And the other is, because he's part of the media, he thinks he has to be confrontational.
Why do you have a bottle of Captain Morgan rum in your... for a teetotaler, that looks odd.
No, you see, you're opinionating again. Now, are you asking the question or are you telling me? Now, this is the Duchess's room.
The film revealed just how close Jimmy's relationship was with his mother and how, since her death, he'd preserved her bedroom in the flat they'd shared.
Now, all this gear was gear she wore, so instead of slinging it away, I thought I'd hang on to it because these make better souvenirs than photographs. These are much nicer than photographs.
However strange we think it is that he's kept his dead mother's clothes wrapped in cling film in a wardrobe, he doesn't think that's strange. He's perfectly proud and happy to let you see that.
How weird. Keeping clothes and knitting wool and stuff like that.
Can we take some of them out?
Well, not really. Well, what do you want to take them out for? Do you want to wear them?
I sense that maybe this is an emotional thing for you and you don't want to share it.
No,
and I respect that.
It's not emotional, it's a friendly thing.
Having spent several weeks with Jimmy, Louis' hope of finding the man behind the mask finally pays off at the end of filming, when Jimmy lets his guard slip for just a moment.
Why have you said in interviews that you don't have emotions?
Because it's easier. It's easier. The truth is, I'm very good at masking them.
And there's a moment of real tenderness where he's completely honest, for the first time, I think, honest on camera about the fact he's a human being.
This is very enjoyable, as it happens. Do you know, it's the most repeated television show, I think, in the history of TV.
Jimmy can kind of quote the film verbatim and has said that when he dies, this will be the piece he once played in his honour, obviously with a Jim will fix it special to follow.
Now then, as it happens, what have we here? Dr. Louis, documentary maker, we award you a Fix-It badge. This would be a very nice parting gift.
Nobody ever got a Fix-It badge unless I did have a Fix-It. And Louis, complex. lovely, terrific. Could learn a lot from me.
At number 49, it's The Fog of War. In 2003, filmmaker Errol Morris persuaded former US Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara to speak candidly on camera for the first time.
In my 7 years as secretary, we came within a hair's breadth of war with the Soviet Union on 3 different occasions. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. For 7 years as Secretary of Defense, I lived the Cold War. During the Kennedy administration, they designed a 100 megaton bomb. It was tested in the atmosphere. I remember this. Cold War? Hell, it was a hot war. I think the human race needs to think more about killing, about conflict. Is that what we want in this 21st century?
From such unique behind-the-scenes insights and some extraordinary archive, Morris constructed an Oscar-winning film about the post-war American empire, whose lessons are as relevant to Iraq in 2005 as to Cuba in 1962. At number 48, it's Malcolm and Barbara.
Malcolm and Barbara, a love story, is just that. It is a love story.
So it was a happy day, wasn't it?
Yes, of course it was.
What's this say?
Producer Paul Watson first approached Malcolm Poynton and his wife Barbara in 1995, when Malcolm had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the age of 51. The couple agreed to Watson filming the entire course of the disease.
That was very well done, Mr. Poynton. We're just ready to start the next set of images now.
What I liked about Paul's attitude was that he wanted honesty. He didn't want anybody to sanitize the truth. That struck a chord with me, because I would only make the film if it would be done warts and all.
Over 4 years, Malcolm and Barbara follows one man's gradual descent into Alzheimer's.
It's easy to forget, isn't it?
He played the piano fabulously well.
And then he started to make mistakes in his once perfect piano playing, and that really upset him. He was getting cross with himself, and that made him a bit cross with other people. No, you're hurting me, stop it.
I think when Malcolm is physically abusive towards her, it's one of the most painful parts of the whole story. That must be appalling.
Do you still love Barbara? Yeah. Yeah?
Oh!
Some awful scenes where Malcolm is really making her crawl along the floor, and he's pulling her hair.
No!
And you think, I'd love to say something. I'd love to say something.
Let go of me.
On one level, you're having a relationship with the people and you're caring about what's happening to them, but when something disastrous happens, truth to tell, you think that might be good television. And anyone who says it doesn't happen is lying.
As Alzheimer's finally took over, Watson's camera recorded the breakdown of a loving marriage.
I hated him for what he was doing, not just to me, but to the thing that was so precious between us.
It was about the strength of their love, and it was about how much can you put somebody through and they still can carry on.
In late 1998, Malcolm was admitted into a care home. But Barbara, unhappy with his treatment, decided to bring him home again. When the film was transmitted in 1999, it was thought Malcolm only had a short time to live.
She's looked after him so well, he's still alive, in a completely vegetative state, but he is alive by her determination.
For years, Barbara struggled to afford the constant care that Malcolm requires. Since the film was shown, she has become a powerful advocate, promoting public awareness of Alzheimer's disease and the needs of those who care for its victims.
She has, in a sense, used it, I think, as a prop to get through this most difficult time of his imminent death.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you today. And I found that I was being asked to appear on television, radio, then give talks, and it's interesting how the film has moved thinking on.
But for how much longer will Barbara have to care for Malcolm?
There is still a willingness to live with Malcolm, and if, for example, he stops feeding naturally, can no longer swallow, I've got to be prepared to let go. And when he's ready, then I've got to be ready. And I'll tell it from his eyes. He can't tell me, but I think I know him well enough, and I'll tell it from the message in his eyes.
At number 47, it's Fred Dibner.
Fred Dibner was born in Lancashire, and from his earliest years, his heart was set on a life at the top.
In 1979, the BBC made a film about a traditional northern steeplejack. Its subject, Fred Dibner, was to become the most unlikely documentary star of the 1980s.
That's the biggest chimney that there is in Bolton. And when I was 15 years old, I climbed up that for a 10-shilling wager.
He'd sit at the top of these chimneys and towers and just tell you a bit about them and tell you a bit about his life. And you just thought, oh, I tell you what, I've never seen anything like this.
Really, we've got to get you on the job. We can't wait much longer.
I'm doing my best. Don't worry, Mr. Shelmerdine.
People related to him. And then when you allied that to the passion and the enthusiasm that he had for his subject, he was a natural.
30 miles an hour.
Fred went on to enjoy a long TV career presenting programmes about our industrial heritage. But it's that first documentary that is remembered fondly by everyone who saw it.
Very often good old industrial heritage and machinery and engineering and things like that get a bit left behind. Fred Dibner represented to me the sort of person who reminded you that what you're seeing outside there has a story.
Them pillars will replace them, then we've had a look at.
Can you turn them yourself?
Oh, I've got a machine.
Have you?
I've invented a machine that'll do it, you see.
Fred was dedicated to preserving chimneys rather than destroying them. But if one did have to be felled, then he preferred to use his own traditional method.
On television, everyone you see going down, it's blown up. There's none of them done with the pit props and the big fire, like they did it in 1899. I like doing it that way because it's more spectacular,
The climax of Steeplejack is this classic documentary scene.
You see it moving the stick.
I don't think now I'd be allowed to do that scene in the same way.
Going!
You can't make films now where you're not putting a bit of voiceover in, giving some information about the chimney and how old it was before it was pulled down.
It felt like a kind of gentle, caring putting to sleep of industrial architecture.
Fred Dibner, MBE, passed away in 2004.
Do you like that?
When the BBC's second channel was launched in 1964, it was a black and white world. By 1969, the nation was in the process of changing over to colour. Rising star David Attenborough was head of BBC Two at the time and wanted to showcase this new technology.
I had the fairly simple and obvious idea that we should look at all the most lovely paintings and buildings and sculptures that Western Europe had produced in the last 2,000 years, put them in some kind of historical order and look at them.
Civilization was the BBC's biggest ever project, taking 3 years to make. It resulted in 13 hours of television. The series was written, produced and presented by art historian and director of the National Gallery, Sir Kenneth Clarke.
What is civilization? I don't know. I can't define it in abstract terms yet, but I think I can recognize it when I see it.
It was absolutely clear that this was a new kind of documentary series that hadn't been done before. The authored series in which one particular person took you through his view of a segment of human experience and learning.
I felt that's what I needed from a documentary. I needed to be shown something in a way which I'd never seen it before. And so I went away, in a sense, slightly changed by the experience.
There are elements about the argument that are dated and that are kind of Western-centric and all the rest of it, and patrician. But what is so fantastic about it is the argument that's built, the way the story unfolds, and the kind of great pleasure that this very educated man has in sharing that knowledge with you. And I think it did an awful lot to build the significance of TV in kind of our culture.
These programs have been filled with great works of genius. There they are. You can't dismiss them.
At number 45, it's Home from the Hill. Molly Dineen, now one of Britain's best-known documentary makers, made her name as a 24-year-old student with her first film.
Well, Home from the Hill is one of these great observational documentaries where you really get a sense of who a person is, and you can see also the relationship between the filmmaker, in this case Molly Dineen, evolve throughout the programme.
Colonel Hilary Hook was one of the leftovers of colonial Kenya, where a strenuous morning of hunting big game and a nice round of polo left one needing a gin and tonic in the afternoon.
I found him because I was in Kenya with my boyfriend at the time, and he was his father. So that was dead handy. I remember actually just very clumsily saying to him, could I make a film about you then? And him saying, of course, sweetie. He was a fantastic character for a film. He was very David Niven-like. He was funny and rude, and he used to say, sweetie, you've got to behave badly, but you've got to know how to do it well. And so he did all the time, and he was so much fun.
Just after Molly started filming Hilary, his landlord evicted him and he had to leave Kenya.
It's a right bugger. To whom it may concern, Kiparenge Kabwezi has worked for me for 10 years or more as my butler. We are parting only because I'm leaving Kenya for good.
Hilary was forced to return to an England he hardly knew.
Having had that incredible vista and there's all this beauty around him, his whole world just went like this.
Concrete jungle with housewives shopping in Safeways.
When he moved back to England, the film really kind of hit its stride, and Molly moved in and just carried on filming.
The documentary evolved into a story of a fish out of water, trying to cope with the everyday.
It's just this lovely scene where he's struggling to open this tin of beans.
Sarah, you can go home.
Bloody hell. Oh, I hate these fucking modern things.
And then it turns into this, like, hilarious scene where the sound woman is sort of desperately trying to help him open his tin of beans.
Turn it on. Switch.
Which made me laugh so much. I mean, actually, the camera's shaking, very unprofessional, because I am crapping myself laughing.
I'm not going to bloody well do it. Fuck the thing. I'll go to the pub.
There's always that borderline moment when you're filming, when do you take the hat off, as it were, put the camera down and look after that person and be a friend and be with them, or do you film the moment? But I was all for just carrying on and on and on into that really dark place when he says, I'm not going to eat anymore.
I'm going to do very well without eating. I can't manage that at all.
I'm amazed nobody's been more critical about it, because I think it's dodgy filming people who are pissed.
Colonel Hilary Hook!
The documentary turned Hilary into a minor celebrity. He was like a fossil from another time.
And he adored the whole publicity side of it, of, you know, going on chat shows and being on Wogan and, you know, getting letters from old ladies of marriage and stuff like that. He just thought that was a hoot.
Life was very pleasant indeed. We were scampering about on horseback. Not a great threat to Hitler, I don't think.
His charm and his slightly sort of old world manners really just, I think, touched people in a way.
Hilary did the sensible thing and got himself a housekeeper and spent his last years in Wiltshire.
I want to ask if you're basically happy.
Oh, blissfully happy in your presence. Otherwise, I represent divine discontent.
Nanook of the North is regarded as the first major non-fiction feature made in the days before the term documentary had even been coined. Surprisingly for a film often cited as the first of an entire genre, much of the action was faked. Despite the Eskimos in Canada having already moved on from igloos and spears to cabins and guns, filmmaker Robert Flaherty asked them to reenact their traditional lifestyle for the camera. In 1995, Charles Dance played Flaherty in Kablunak, the story of how Flaherty made Nanook of the North.
The way they slept, the way they ate, the way they hunted, the skills that they employed to survive in that part of the world.
Rather than simply record events, Flaherty staged scenes to get the shots he needed. He even built half an igloo so he could film its interior.
And he would rehearse. People would say, you know, I don't like that. You know, let's do that again. Just please do that again. And he kept doing that so that when he got back into the cutting room, he had sufficient stuff that he could cut a scene the way he wanted it to look.
What Flaherty did was he discovered how to make narrative out of footage that he'd filmed with quote-unquote real people. He uses close-ups, long shots, establishing shots. He actually shows us that the language of the documentary is the language of the mainstream fictional cinema.
The documentary does what any good novel does, which is it takes the building blocks of reality and arranges them in such a way, not so as to fake the message, but rather so as to bring it closer to what is actually happening.
He believed in a means to an end. He knew the end that he wanted, and if the means that he used to achieve that end were in some way contrived, it didn't bother him.
It didn't bother the cinema audiences either, who made it one of the most successful films of the 20s.
It was released as a kind of second feature with a Harold Lloyd film. And to Pathé's astonishment, people were coming out of the cinemas talking about this funny little film about Eskimo people, rather than the Harold Lloyd film. And that's what they were queuing to see. I think it was that film that gave Robert Flaherty his title of Father of the Documentary.
At number 43, it's Hearts of Darkness. In 1976, when director Francis Ford Coppola risked everything to make the biggest film of his career, his wife Eleanor followed the 3-year journey of the making of Apocalypse Now. The resulting documentary was every bit as unique and astonishing as the film itself.
Okay, this is Coppola. All aircraft, all Hornets, all picture aircraft, everyone land in the rice paddies. We'll have a meeting.
The film has an amazing intimacy by virtue of the fact that it's actually Coppola's wife who's making it. That gives, obviously, an access that is completely unusual. It also gives a real poignancy and piquancy to the narrative because Coppola has mortgaged all of their property in order to make this film. He's basically put them all on the line to do it.
Because of the Civil War in the South, every day the government sends different pilots who haven't participated in the rehearsals, wrecking tens of thousands of dollars worth of shots. In the middle of a complicated shot, the helicopters were called away to fight the rebels.
He thought they'd agreed to only take 2 of his helicopters, and actually they'd taken 6 of them, and he was really pissed off that he'd taken these helicopters to go off and fight the war, which I just thought was glorious.
What it shows is just the sheer lunacy into which a feature film production can descend. a large number of the people involved in it, if they're not mad to start off with, are quite clearly insane by the end of it, by virtue of a combination of spending almost a year in the Filipino jungle with as many drugs and as much drink as they can possibly handle.
I've made a few films and they've been horrible and tough and they've had problems and this and that, and then you watch Hearts of Darkness and you just think, man, I've had it easy.
At number 42, it's Driving School. In 1997, TV documentary seemed to have lost its way. Few people wanted to watch it or make it. Then along came a little series that made reality popular again, Driving School.
I've tried 6 times and I was hopeless. We were the first docu-soap and we didn't realise how big a hit it'd be. No one did. As Bob Monkhouse says, I know I'm a sinner, but God, please make me a winner.
It came about because we were looking for really good storytelling and documentary because I didn't have enough drama to fill the schedule. And they came along and they said, well, look, I promise we'll make it cheap.
Stop.
Driving School soon became a surprise hit, pulling in 12 million viewers.
Oh, that's all right. I told you, don't panic.
It had weekly instalments. It had cliffhangers. And like a lot of soap operas, it was dealing with ordinary people having a very extraordinary, interesting time.
Driving School included several memorable characters, but the undisputed star of the series was Maureen Rees, the serial learner, and in a supporting role, her long-suffering husband, Dave.
Read my lips.
Mo, if you're going to say any more,
if you're going to say any more, I get it out. You know, actors acting a part. It's me and David, how real life is, and that's how it should be, not put on.
Betsy, the larder, became a mobile TV studio, stuffed full of tiny cameras recording every hair-raising moment.
Keep up the curb!
But Driving School was no fly on the wall, and it was whispered that some scenes might have been contrived.
I mean, it was very nearly car crash TV.
Whoa! Whoa! For Christ's sake!
People have said that the near crash on the dual carriageway was a setup, but actually it wasn't a setup. It happened the very first day I went out filming with Maureen.
You laugh about it even now. I mean, remembering how she nearly went and remembering her husband's sheer terror.
Whoa! I didn't realise how near death we were. I could have been off! No. What'd you do that for? I could have been off!
Right, no pass. OK then, Maureen, that is the end of your driving test, and I am pleased to tell you you've passed.
Once she'd finally got her licence, Maureen was launched into a celebrity career as the first lady of docusoap.
Ladies and gentlemen, Maureen Rees.
I've done things I've never done before, and I've enjoyed it. I was lucky enough to meet the Queen. I was gobsmacked.
She even covered the Madness song, Driving in My Car.
I also had a little knock.
Today, Maureen is just a viewer again, with doubts about the world of reality TV, which Driving School helped to bring about.
They want sex and glamour. Bloody hell, I'm no prune, don't get me wrong, but they're overplaying it now. I won't slow down. I'm going to the end of the road, and that's that. Oh, sorry.
On November 21st, 1974, the IRA attacked civilians on mainland Britain for the very first time, with a horrific bomb attack in Birmingham, which killed 21 people. These men were swiftly convicted, and they became known as the Birmingham Six. The men always protested their innocence, and journalist Chris Mullen, now an MP, was one of the few who believed them, and with the help of the World in Action team in 1985, set about trying to prove it.
Lots of innocent people had died, and quite understandably, there was a desire on the part of the public, and of course the police, to get results quickly. As a result, a number of corners were cut, and in every case, the wrong people were put away. The convictions were based on 2 main planks: confessions signed by 4 of the 6, and forensic evidence against 2 of them.
The programme revealed that the confessions had been extracted from the men after severe beatings had taken place. and that the forensic evidence indicating they had traces of nitroglycerin on their hands was flawed. Their independent tests showed that a chemically similar substance was present in the varnish on playing cards. The findings of the program resulted in an appeal, but the men were not released as expected. In 1987, Chris Mullin became an MP, and he and the World in Action team continued to campaign for the men's release, still fighting public opinion, fueled by a hostile tabloid press.
It was 1991, fully 6, almost 7 years since we'd started work, before they finally walked out of the Old Bailey.
It was a very moving moment. For me, it was a vindication because I had to put up with some years of abuse. And so I was very anxious to be photographed there alongside the 6. I have some of my favourite Sun headlines framed on my wall. The best one, and it covers the whole page, is Looney MP backs bomb gang.
The World in Action campaign and the exposure of this miscarriage of justice led to the establishment of the Criminal Cases Review Commission.
Many, many people must go through their entire careers and just never have a day or a moment like that.
At number 40, it's the human body. Groundbreaking BBC series The Human Body used state-of-the-art technology and clever know-how to become the definitive work on our bodies.
Cut it!
The series was responsible for filming several TV firsts, from ovulation through to death. So capturing the first female orgasm was just another challenge.
What we had to do was to get an optically pure, clear glass test tube, really. This isn't a tiny camera like you can have the kind of lipstick cameras now. This was a 16mm film camera with an 18-inch long-nosed lens called an endoscope lens. And then it was just the question of finding a volunteer.
And how'd you go about finding a volunteer?
You ask enough people.
Rather than just another fly-on-the-wall documentary about prisoners, in 2002, director Brian Hill devised a unique way of getting the inmates and staff of Feltham Young Offenders Institution to tell their own story.
You see the iron fist of a stepmother, leave that behind.
We cooked up this idea of getting people to speak in verse based on words, based on interviews that we'd done with them, and we then passed those interviews to Simon and he wrote verse based on what they'd said.
And then to represent those things back to them as song or poetry.
When I had received the lyrics, I had to actually graft them into songs.
Some info that you need to know to help you live life in a Feltham soul.
The predictable thing would be for me to go in and do, use dark, sort of like gritty drums and, dark discordant sounds and whatever. And I thought, okay, well, when I'm doing the music, try to add a little colour or something different, just to have some sort of contrast to see if that sort of fusion would work.
One man's life is another man's razor. They sent me away for skew with behaviour. I want so ice from the London Marathon. They watch me at night, I'm the night watchman.
He wants no light from the London Marathon. We watch him at night, he's the night watchman.
Night Watchman is a rather upbeat number about an inmate on suicide watch, with the prison officers on the chorus.
Surprise is our greatest ally in these films. You're not expecting a documentary subject to suddenly break into song.
I think my favourite song was probably Boomerang Boy, which is the boy who'd been born in Holloway.
All he knew was prison. I mean, his uncle had done time. As the song goes, mother did time, brother did time, uncle did time, now it's my turn.
Brother did time, mother did time, uncle did time, now it's my turn. First day home and it all goes wrong. Boomerang boy, he's back to square one.
But there were a few sort of hairy moments. Take, for example, Paul McBride. And you've got to take into account the fact that he can't read or write. He's got to learn a song. And he started threatening me. He was like, you know, if I don't get it done, you know, soon, I'm going to smash this place up. And I suppose there are different ways of dealing with situations, and, you know.
This is me. I know you don't see what I see in HMP. Can't wait for that date when free. Gaining wisdom through the thoughts that are sent to me. It's not where I want to be, but this is meant to be.
I think the fact that they could sing and do it really, really well, and do it with lots of kind of gusto, it makes you listen to them, I think. I think it makes you listen to their words more.
To me, it's not where I want to be, but this is meant to be. This is me.
I wouldn't like to claim that we've turned all these lives around. Maybe in a small way, it's made them think about the future and about what they can do and what talents they have.
At number 38, it's Beneath the Veil. In the spring of 2001, before the events of 9/11 had put Afghanistan in the spotlight, reporter Cyrus Shah and the Dispatches team went there to investigate the brutal fundamentalist Taliban regime, then at its peak. The documentary revealed shocking footage of public executions and an insight into the oppression suffered by the Afghan people, especially the women.
It's an extraordinary feeling because I have actually seen pictures of women being shot at this penalty area here that we're just coming up to, and also have seen pictures of men being hung from this goalpost.
Beneath the Veil really was a sort of cry for help to the world, because on behalf of the Afghan people, that these things could happen in the 21st century in Afghanistan, and nobody knew about them, nobody seemed to care.
I'm going undercover. From now on, I'll live the life of an Afghan woman.
I was the most terrified, for sure, was during the undercover, and I've never felt fear like that before, because it was all the fear of what might happen to me and to the people I was with. I am a reporter, I'm a professional reporter, but I'm also partly Afghan, and so it became much more personal than anything I'd ever done before, and I got sucked in deeper and deeper into it. This is really an incredibly serious, terrifying place to be if you're an Afghan.
There I am, below the letter E. The real beauties and rewards of People Century came from the archive.
People Century was broadcast in 26 episodes between 1995 and 1997. The story of the 20th century told by the ordinary people who lived through it.
It's a clip of a girl presenting flowers to Stalin on his 70th birthday. And they found the girl, they found her now middle-aged. And she remembers her feelings at the time.
I had eyes only for him. He had such kindly eyes. It was as if he was my father. I just wanted to touch him.
Wonderful moments where just one person gives us absolute piercing insight into a whole moment of time.
Out here we is stoned, immaculate.
In the summer of 1969, 500,000 people gathered in a field in upstate New York for the event that would define an era.
We are stars.
The Woodstock film captures that famous 3-day festival in all its chaotic glory, an essential document of the 60s counterculture and its musical revolution.
I was blown away, by the movie. This is one of those pinnacle moments in history that you've heard about so many times, and, here it is.
Yeah, it looks like some kind of biblical, epical, unbelievable scene.
Oh my God. Look at how massive this thing is.
That film was the first time that the attitude of the filmmakers and the cameramen was right inside the event, and they were people who were loving being there and capturing it.
Director Mike Wadley shot 120 miles of footage, which was eventually edited down to just under 4 hours. The film won an Oscar for the Best Documentary at the 1970 Academy Awards.
There are these phenomenally small, compact cameras that we use, without which we literally could not have made the film that we made.
Also, I don't think it's dated.
I think skinny dipping is just beautiful.
That simple split-screen thing of showing parallel events at the same time does give you a kind of sense of omnipresence, of seeing somehow the whole event.
You're reliving this moment of time that was phenomenal.
It was too big for the world.
It's never been an easy job for anyone. Some people would describe it as an impossible job.
When TV crews filmed the England team in the qualifying rounds of the 1994 World Cup, Graham Taylor's performance as manager became the centrepiece of a memorable film.
If it hadn't been shown, I think very few people would have realised how much I cared.
The campaign to qualify was not going well. Despite having won his first 12 matches as manager, Graham Taylor was now viewed as a liability.
You've got to be mentally tough in this job. And I can well understand how national managers are brought down. And I don't intend that to happen to me.
Who at the FA thought it was a good idea to allow Graham Taylor to talk to anyone in the media? God knows. But to allow full access to a faltering England World Cup campaign, absolutely astonishing.
I see too many people going onto television to give an image of themselves, and it's not them. Now, for better or for worse, in that particular environment, at that particular time, that was me.
I loved and admired Graham Taylor. I spent a hell of a lot of time with him. He's a totally genuine bloke. And he never once backed out of anything to do with this film.
We are looking for the win, but we're certainly not looking to be beaten, because then you're even Steven. We've got to go to Norway and, if at all possible, win that game, because then we've beat them over our two-game series, because we've won and drawn. What we mustn't do against Norway is lose to them.
You realise that you are seeing a person pushed to the edge, because Graham Taylor always looked so upright. He always wore his blazer, he was very proper, always had a nice clean white shirt, and there he was, swearing like a trooper.
With Graham Taylor's agreement to wear a microphone, the documentary offered an unprecedented glimpse into his touchline motivation techniques.
Tell him less! Fucking Paul, come on! Hey! Initially, I was reluctant to put the mic on. One, because I knew that kind of language was part and parcel of the game.
Originally, we had no agreement to put a radio mic on. It was one of those things that I thought I could maybe persuade him to do later, and luckily we did.
Oh, fucking hell, we are in trouble. It was promoted on the use of the F word, which apparently it was something like 27 times, if my memory serves, that I said. Well, over 2 years, hey, hold on a minute, come on. That's not bad, I don't think. Went to fucking sleep, didn't we? How many, hey?
Every time he opens his mouth, something extraordinary comes out.
What sort of thing is happening here? Can we not knock it? What are they being instructed?
But there was one phrase that the nation would never forget.
Do I not like that?
Do I not like that? Is the catchphrase. I don't think that will ever go away. It's entered, the sporting vocabulary.
At least I seem to have added some kind of phrase to the English language.
Crunch time came with the deciding match that England had to win to qualify for the World Cup.
A massive attention then came onto the game that really mattered, the one in Rotterdam against Holland.
But England lost, and Graham Taylor was out of a job.
You see, at the end of the day, I get the sack now. Having been a football manager, wanted to become the England football manager, got right to the top, and then the brick wall hits you and you don't qualify for... That's where my hurt was. Do I not like that?
Over 5 programmes in 1992, Signs of the Times took a long, lingering look at the seemingly superficial subject of taste.
I have not yet discovered a coaster that I would be prepared to accept in my house. I don't know what the way around it is.
I developed a manifesto with a strict set of rules as to how Signs of the Times was going to be shot. We would shoot everything in a widescreen format. There would be no music, there would be no mixes. Everything would be shot in a very frontal, photographic way. We would hold shots for as long as possible. I was interested in banality and in ordinariness. So that became the heartland for Signs of the Times.
If I had my own way, it'd be just one, and that'd be the modern art.
I hate it. I hate that clock he's just bought. God, it's horrible.
I was sort of tempted by the idea of really boring people.
My glass head and my imitation glasses, Ray-Bans, I got that from a shop in Slough. I just walked past it and I see it and I thought it was quite good. It'd go quite well on top of my TV.
At number 33, it's The War Game. In 1965, the BBC commissioned 29-year-old Peter Watkins to make a film depicting what the events of a nuclear attack in Britain would really be like.
A single megaton nuclear missile overshoots Manston Airfield in Kent and airbursts. At this distance, the heat wave is sufficient to cause melting of the upturned eyeball.
It was a brilliant documentary because it used official statements and contrasted with what would really happen in the event of a nuclear attack.
It tore away the veil, the curtain that hid the reality of what nuclear war was. It showed that the measures that the government had for dealing with a nuclear attack were patently absurd.
Put a door on top of a table and get some tins of beans and sit underneath it. And this was really saying, not much hope of that, guys.
Despite having financed the film, the BBC decided not to show it.
When it was banned, the Home Secretary, Frank Soskis, said he thought it would create public disquiet, and he told the BBC not to broadcast it.
They thought, oh my God, we're going to show this to millions of people, and it would have been seen by 10 or 20 million people, and they're going to be really worried that the people in charge of this country don't know what they're doing.
They just thought that it would have too devastating an effect on British public opinion, and people might turn against the entire notion of having nuclear weapons.
The government was trying to frighten us into believing that the Russians were planning to attack Britain. And all this nuclear rearmament was about that. Then they realised, when they saw the film, that it could create fear that would demoralise people.
It's been estimated that a nuclear attack on Britain, using approximately 160 single megaton missiles, would immediately kill or seriously wound between 1/3 and 1/2 of her entire population.
To this day, the BBC formally denied that the banning of the war game was due to pressure from the government.
Look at it with 30, 40 years of our experience down the line. I think it's probably unthinkable that it would be banned, because there would just be an outcry.
The blast wave from a thermonuclear explosion has been likened to an enormous door slamming in the depths of hell.
Over the next 20 years, the film had limited screenings in cinemas, but remained unseen by the public at large until 1985, when the BBC finally decided it was time to broadcast it.
When you watch The War Game now, it's much more advanced and hard-hitting than documentaries and drama documentaries are that are being made 30 years later.
The surprise hit of 2003, Spellbound, follows the intense real-life experience of contestants and their families in the year-long American National Spelling Competition, where 9 million children take part, but there can only be one winner.
Nephelognacy.
Dysphagia.
Hellebore.
Zyboxy.
Palimpsest.
Well, it's more intense than any competition.
STRESS.
This one letter, and you're out.
At number 31, it's The Power of Nightmares.
When almost every
mainstream television outlet is telling the viewer that Al-Qaeda is a major organisation. To have one filmmaker pop up and say, ooh, it doesn't exist at all, the whole thing is fatuous, is at least worthy of the argument.
Adam Curtis is a director with a unique authorial voice. In The Power of Nightmares, he showed how a contrary and radical idea could be expressed in a documentary.
Today, people have lost faith in ideologies. Increasingly, politicians are seen simply as managers of public life. But now, they have discovered a new role that restores their power and authority. Instead of delivering dreams, politicians now promise to protect us from nightmares.
We believed in our religion, both as an ideology and practice.
I think a lot of Adam's appeal is not only that he's revealing fresh facts to us, but his interpretation of those facts is not coming from a kind of predictable political position.
1, 2, 3.
It all looks a bit almost ropey, but that sort of doesn't matter because it's how he's telling the story and what he puts the images with and how he uses the archive that matters.
It's a chancy job, but somebody has to do it.
He takes silent movies and music and recent news archive, and he'll muddle them all together and twist them around and create a completely new mood out of them. And I've never seen anyone do that before.
I really can't
But
stay.
baby, it's cold outside.
I've got to go away.
But baby, it's cold outside.
This is a man who's got an opinion and he's telling it well and he's shocking us. And you can fight with it if you like, but it's arresting where he tells it.
I think everybody would be uneasy if you turned on your telly and night after night it was that kind of programme making. But is there a place for it? I think there is.
At number 30, It's a History of Britain.
Understanding that there are people who know stuff and they could tell us the stuff they know is something to be welcomed.
In the course of 16 one-hour programmes, Simon Sharma's A History of Britain was an unapologetic return to a bygone age of educational and informative TV.
It was not expected to be a hit. The ratings were much higher than they should have been. This was a risk that paid off.
The series took 6 years to make, and although Sharma was at first a reluctant writer and presenter, he soon began to relish the job, taking on the huge story and making each chapter his own.
Mary's lapdog had to be taken away from the wreckage of her mistress. They tried and tried to scrub it clean of the clotted blood. They did so, but it wouldn't eat. It languished. It died. It was just another martyr to Mary's pathetic, tragic life.
I suppose I felt my job was to push it more into a story, an exciting story, so that you were disguising the fact that it was a lecture. Kind of like shooting the feeling behind the script rather than shooting the script. And it's difficult because you have to just not resort to your normal sort of literal instincts.
History is all about experience rather than just brute facts and figures, and that's something that Sharma recognised, and it reads very, very well in television.
Although the BBC had a reputation for such a landmark series, A History of Britain looks very different and avoids the usual history TV clichés. The success of the series revived public interest in all aspects of history and led to a boom in programmes about the past, which shows no sign of slowing down.
You wouldn't have found out anything that you couldn't have found out by looking through a whole series of existing history books. But as a way of bringing together and deciding what was important, it was very difficult to better it.
She just totally refused to talk to me.
I didn't want to communicate with him. I thought he was a knobhead.
Once you realise that ordinary people in ordinary situations can be entertaining, then it's not very far to jump to think, well, actually, if we took ordinary people and put them in extraordinary, manipulated situations, wouldn't that be even more entertaining?
At 29,
It's Wife Swap.
One of the most successful reality television formats ever, Wife Swap utilises clever casting, shrewd manipulation and judicious editing to guarantee great TV.
Here, very poor shops at Sainsbury's. Get off, don't touch me.
Straight away, your back's up.
Wife Swap's a clash of values. It's about finding two families that hold completely different sets of values and to let them crunch into each other, and drama and confrontation often ensue.
It's not your house. That is my house for these few days.
You are the luckiest, laziest bitch in the UK.
What's happening in Wife Swap is the drive by the producers towards a desired result, and the desired result is as much conflict and as much swearing as you can possibly fit into a programme round about that time of the evening.
I'm not fucking shy of fucking saying, I will fucking put the wash on. I will fucking mop the floor. I will fucking bath my kids.
The people that they choose for Wife Swap are always real extremes. So you do get people who are almost like kind of, you know, Wayne and Waynetta slob or something.
Wuss.
The most notorious wife swap was the one that went wrong. When Lizzie Bardsley swapped with Emma Spry, it was an experiment that lasted just 3 days.
If I was asked what my programme was, I call it when the shit hit the fan.
She's just gone totally off her fucking head, told to get that slag out of my fucking house and pack your fucking bags while you're at it. I don't know what the fuck's got into her.
The way that she was and the way that she came into my house, it just obviously rubbed me up the wrong way. She's a marriage wrecker, she was a dirty little slapper, and that's how I see her.
It's like car crash television, maybe.
Don't sit there flattening your eyelids at my husband, you fucking tart.
Oh, God, she's dreadful. Oh, no. Oh, I'll just watch a bit more.
Oh, you can speak, OK. Here, don't give my husband permission to speak, you new snooty fucking move.
I think that a lot of popular television is about conflict and transformation. But if it's just conflict, it can often be quite unsatisfying. It might pull an audience and they'll think, oh, good, I'm going to see a row tonight on Wife Swap. But they feel good about it if it's more than conflict, if it's conflict plus a sense that people get something out of the experience.
It absolutely provides public therapy to two families. All the problems in a family and the problems in a relationship and between parents and children come flowing out.
Excuse me, that's a lager.
More and more we find that people are changed as the experience of what's actually only just 10 days living in somebody else's home, and yet it often has a very, very profound effect on them.
Yeah, but I've had 10 years of shit, haven't I? Yeah. How do you replace that?
I apologise for the last 10 years and I'll put that right.
Wife Swap changed my life completely, turned it round, threw it up in the air, come back, was it? Absolutely, yeah. It's absolutely turned my whole life round.
Thin Blue Line is one of my favourite documentaries.
I mean, for me, it showed me another way of making a documentary film.
There was such a brilliant investigation. It was done in such a wonderful theatrical way by Errol Morris. I think it's by far his best film.
The Thin Blue Line broke new ground with its combination of investigative journalism and cinematic style, and picked up the Academy Award for Best Documentary. In 1976, Randall Adams hitched a ride with teenager David Harris. Later that night, one of them shot a police officer. Both claimed to be innocent, but Adams was convicted of the crime and placed on death row. The film re-examined the facts behind the killing.
Often we accept as truth things that are just convenient for us to believe as truth.
Why did I meet this kid? I don't know. Why did I run out of gas at that time? I don't know. But it happened.
I'd run away from home a couple times, once or twice, I don't know. And this all started, Dave was running away from home.
It didn't tell you everything at the beginning. You know, it let you work things out as you went along.
Just by seeming to present raw material and letting you decide with no voiceover.
You're not told what happened. You're forced to actually, like an investigator, like myself in the middle of all of this, go through the process of thinking about the testimony, the evidence, and coming to a conclusion.
And it just really sucks you into the story.
Thin Blue Line was one of the first movies to really use recreations. And Errol, he does a great job of shooting these scenes. They're beautiful. He really is. He's a great storyteller.
At the time that I did these reenactments, it was unheard of. It was considered to be a documentary no-no. It's been imitated ad nauseum. You can't turn on a television set without seeing an example of it.
The Philip Glass score worked incredibly well.
It's been edited to the music, or the music's been cut to the film in such an effective way that it functions completely integrally as a whole, and is almost hypnotic in its effect.
Amazingly, David Harris eventually admits his crime in a taped interview with the director.
Well, what do you think about whether or not he's innocent?
I'm sure he is.
How can you be sure?
I'm the one that knows.
The film was directly responsible for Randall Adams' eventual release.
I don't believe they consciously tried to convict an innocent man, but I do believe it was easy for them to believe Adams did it.
For more than 12 years, convicted murderer Randall Dale Adams proclaimed his innocence from behind prison bars, including 2 years on death row. Tonight, he posted bond and will walk free.
The fact that it got him out of jail is incredible, but it's a great movie, by itself. It's a really powerful piece of filmmaking.
Although never convicted of this killing, David Harris spent 20 years on death row for another murder and was finally executed last summer. In 1988, the BBC had the idea to test the premise of the classic Jules Verne novel, Around the World in 80 Days. The aim being to circumnavigate the world using any means of travel available except for aircraft, with the role of Phileas Fogg taken by former Monty Python member Michael Palin.
The idea of a spontaneous documentary, of things actually happening in real time as you go around, was probably not something that had been done before.
There are dhows heading all over the Gulf and down to Somalia and Zanzibar. And he's found one going my way, too. Allons-y, Passepartout.
And his charm is, of course, at the foundation of the film. He doesn't have to do much. He just has to be himself, really.
I'm like a friend travelling with them. There's nothing very set up. It's not really like watching a sort of genius at work, because it certainly isn't, It's watching just someone at work who's very similar to themselves.
This vegetable, it's not meat.
Yes, you like this?
Yes, it's very good. It tastes like meat, but it's not.
There is always the danger of that Dr. Livingstone kind of feel. But Palin, for some reason, is able to remove himself from that by his sheer engagement with the people he's mixing with and with the camera.
A week spent on a slow boat to Bombay with an Indian crew surprisingly became one of the most memorable episodes of the series.
About 3 hours into it, I was struck with either Bombay Bum or Dal Dose.
One of my favourite moments in the Ancient Mariner programme was when he played Bruce Springsteen at full volume to this old Indian sailor, and the man was sitting there doing the funky chicken. That was fantastic. That was pure humanity on screen.
Unbelievable what this man can take. Full volume now. This is full volume, Kasim. Are you all right?
Of course, we got into terrible trouble with the snake restaurant that was kind of eating snake in China. I don't think any of us were expecting it to be skinned at table, but that's what happens there.
Whoa. Good heavens. It's like going to an abattoir to get a meal, isn't it, really?
Yes, I suppose if you...
I suppose you didn't know much about that. Look at the head. The head is still wriggling about. Just some ice cream for me, please.
Michael Palin now, of course, is one of the most travelled presenters on Earth, with 5 more series of his documentary adventures under his belt. But oddly, he wasn't the first choice to present Around the World in 80 Days.
As I understand it, Michael Palin was the third choice.
Miles Kington and Noel Edmonds had both been offered the role I got in the end. Anyway, I'm glad I said yes. Whether they're glad I said yes, I don't know.
Well, I'm sure they're fine men, but I'm also equally sure that If Noel Edmonds had made the programme in '88, we wouldn't be talking about it now, would we?
At number 26, it's John's Not Mad.
Some of the time when I feel bad, I just feel like killing myself or something like that. It feels so bad.
John Davidson is 16. He suffers from a disturbing neurological disorder, once regarded as a wild madness.
Well, so...
But when you know him better, you discover that John's not mad.
In 1989, the compelling story of John Davidson brought the phrase Tourette syndrome into the national consciousness.
Fuck.
John and his mother Heather had good reason to want their story told on film.
He had no friends, the family were social outcasts really, so they had nothing to lose and therefore everything to gain. I think John hoped that maybe the programme would legitimise his condition in some way, bring it into public knowledge so that people would know that he was not mad.
When I feel I'm going to say it, I try and stop myself, but it just feels as if I have to say it.
The film showed just how difficult everyday situations were for a Tourette sufferer.
I mean, you know, I just think about him sitting down, having dinner with his family. I think they're having fish and chips or something. And the mother just really wants a quiet, civilised meal. And everyone's just chatting away, and he's just sat there in the corner, just spitting and swearing.
Fucking not bad.
I remember him being in the library, which was this agonising scene of him in a place that clearly was very difficult for him to be.
Fuck off! Hey!
For John, the film was a major turning point in his life.
He was given public recognition. He was something of a minor celebrity in his hometown.
He was an ordinary person in a documentary, and he became a really well-known national figure that people would talk about.
The film transformed John into a kind of ambassador for Tourette's.
I don't think Tourette's was really in the public awareness at all. I do completely think it was that programme that brought it into the arena.
The public awareness the film generated was a godsend for others in the same situation as John.
Documentaries like John's Not Mad, a bit like the one I participated in last year, shagging, if it gets two people talking on the bus that might not have mentioned the words Tourette's and tics, and if that starts a conversation between two people on one bus once ever, that's my goal achieved.
In 2002, the BBC revisited John to see how he was coping with Tourette's as an adult. John now works as a caretaker at his local community centre. He also runs youth sporting groups where the children and other staff take John's inappropriate outbursts in their stride.
What he'd done was, through his humour and through his wonderful sort of personality, he'd managed to actually get those around him to begin to accept him.
Piss off, Liam, you prick. Pardon me. Cassie, Johnny. Before I was featured on the documentary, I felt I had to kind of hide away. A lot of people were quite frightened. As you can imagine, maybe a young lad suddenly shouting fuck or a sexual obscenity or something. I think it did help to take away the fear. You know, it's like we don't need to be frightened of this guy. He does it and that's it.
At number 25, it's The Secret Policeman.
When you see documentaries like this, which show the truth of what people really feel, then you can get a sense of how far we have to go.
A dog born in a barn is still a dog. A Paki born in Britain is still a fucking Paki.
After the 1999 Macpherson report, alleged racism within the police force became an ideal subject for TV investigation. But journalistically, the task was fraught with difficulty. The Secret Policeman found a solution.
I kept thinking, how can we find a way of actually really genuinely finding out if that's the case? If you'd done a conventional programme about it, for legal reasons, we probably wouldn't have been able to broadcast it, and it probably wouldn't have been watchable. So I thought this was a perfect subject to apply undercover techniques to.
In early 2003, undercover reporter Mark Daly spent 5 months as a trainee for the Greater Manchester Police, using covert filming to capture evidence of widespread racism.
Put a scenario to you. See in a Jaguar. What are you going to do? Have it. What for?
Because he's a fucking packy in a Jaguar.
What Mark did in The Secret Policeman made it the most significant and important undercover documentary that's ever been done in this country.
When you see it raw there, then you'll finally believe it. That told Middle England that we weren't just bellyaching and being bleating blacks or Asians. This was true, and this documentary was incontrovertible.
It's a hatred thing.
The Secret Policeman shocked viewers and grabbed every headline, forcing government and the police authorities into immediate action.
Paulding has shamed his colleagues, his uniform, and the service. He is a disgrace.
As a result of The Secret Policeman, several men resigned from the police. But an inquiry by the Commission for Racial Equality, launched in response to the programme, has recently reported that racism is still at the heart of the police service.
We cannot underestimate the impact that The Secret Policeman has had upon the police service, upon the public, and upon attitudes. My fear from seeing The Secret Policeman is really how many more people have actually got through that net and are now in positions of influence.
At number 24, it's Omnibus, Cracked Actor.
See, I'm just the space cadet, he's the commander.
What's the significance of Cracked Actor?
Alan Yentop's programme, Cracked Actor, followed David Bowie's 1974 US tour. Bowie was then the most fascinating musician in the world, a superstar.
It captured a moment in the life of that artist, if you like, which was a very, very interesting moment. He inhabited different guises and contrived new identities for himself. That's what he was busy doing.
Bowie's most famous guise had been his rock star alter ego, Ziggy Stardust.
Sails of oblivion at my head.
But in Cracked Actor, he was searching for a new persona.
I was finding out amazing things about me and what I'd done and where I was going.
You got a sense that the mask had, been ripped off for a moment.
A lot of our encounters were late at night or in the back of a car, and he wasn't prepared for it, he wasn't controlling it, so it was very much my interpretation of Bowie, really, at the time.
They were lucky, in a sense, to get him at the point where he was, in some ways, falling apart.
Mixed up, man.
He was very much wrapped up in his trip at the time, which was white powder and other substances.
It's almost therapy, that's what I'm saying. It kind of helped him organise some sense of who he was in a time where he was losing a sense of who he was.
By the end of the film, David Bowie had found his new persona, soul singer. The Young Americans album was released in 1975, and the single Fame became his first US #1.
I never wanted to be a rock and roll star. I never, honest God, I wasn't even there.
At number 23, it's Beyond the Clouds. Filmed, produced and directed by Phil Agland over a period of 5 years, Beyond the Clouds gave a rare insight into life in one town in rural China and won Best Factual Series and Best Photography at the 1994 BAFTAs.
Every day for hundreds of years, the people of this mountainous area have converged on the market town of Lijiang.
Eileen, how do you feel about the verdict?
Eileen challenges all our understandings of humanity.
Eileen was, considered to be a pariah. She was a female. She killed 6 or possibly 7 men.
The whole thing's in doubt. You know, whether she killed them, whether she killed them in self-defense, or whether she just shot them in cold blood.
I did like Eileen. I liked her a lot, actually.
I sentence you to death for the murder of David Spears.
She was a bit like a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old in this body of someone who'd been through hell and looked ravaged.
It had been 10 years since Nick Broomfield's first film about Eileen, when he was unexpectedly summoned to her final appeal. Previously, she had pleaded self-defense, but now changed her story, claiming to have killed in cold blood. It was as if Eileen really wanted to be executed.
If you can imagine being held in a cell the size of your toilet and being told all the time that you're subhuman, you should die, and being held in solitary confinement, people lose their minds.
You have to kill Eileen Warnes because she'll kill again.
Her appeals have been exhausted. She wants to meet her creator.
Hey, how you doing?
But Broomfield still doubted that she was capable of killing 7 men in cold blood. And in his next interview with Eileen, he was fortunate to get the truth on film.
There was a point where I ran out of tape, and I moved out of her view to change tape.
She put the tape in, and Eileen was saying, well, I did do it in self-defense, and then she filmed it from the side. So we actually got these comments.
Was it self-defense?
Yes, but I can't tell anybody.
Here was Eileen saying, I did kill in self-defense, but I don't want to say that because I want to die.
Governor Jeb Bush signs death warrants.
Broomfield and Churchill had finished filming and begun editing the documentary when they heard that a date had been fixed for Eileen's execution.
She was allowed one final interview, and she wanted it to be us, and it was something we couldn't say no to.
Hi, Eileen. It was the prison cafeteria where this was happening, and there were all these prison officers coming in behind me.
It was creepy because there were so many people around. It was not an intimate moment.
I'm not going to get in depth about my cases, Nick. I'm on my way to the chamber, nothing stopping it.
It was much more of a performance on her part towards the end. It was...
You're an inhumane bunch of fucking living bastards and bitches, and you're going to get your asses nuked in the end, and pretty soon it's coming.
And it was decimating for me when she got up and walked out like that, and that was obviously the last time I saw her.
You dirty son of bitches.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There was something so lonely, I think, about Eileen. I think she was the most lonely person I think I've ever met. And I feel that as a compassionate society, which one hopes we are, that one would have learnt something from her awful life.
This is a world ruled by dinosaurs.
Walking with Dinosaurs combined cutting-edge computer animation with the BBC's natural history expertise to produce one of the most unique wildlife series ever.
We'd seen dinosaurs portrayed by Hollywood as monsters, and being a documentary maker, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could portray them as real animals, because they were.
They're dynamic animals with interactions and as exciting and as diverse as all of the living animals around us today.
Walking with Dinosaurs was obviously inspired in part by Jurassic Park from 1993, which had not only whetted the public's appetite for dinosaurs, but set new standards for computer animation. The series was criticised by some for going beyond science and taking too much dramatic license.
Competition is intense between the chicks, and one is already picked on by the other two.
Walking with Dinosaurs is a very entertaining series, and it's about dinosaurs, that's true. But it's not particularly about the science of paleontology.
I loved watching Walking with Dinosaurs. I watched it with my children. It's children's television. It's certainly not documentary. It's a drama. It's completely fictional.
It's not a lie, it's not a con trick, but You'd be really, really bored if we just showed some dinosaurs standing there doing very little except eat a few leaves.
If you look at the best natural history programmes, frequently they're telling you a story which helps you understand these animals, helps you understand how they live.
Each Diplodocus drops over a ton of dung on the prairie every day. This attracts yet more insects.
If you know that Diplodocus, a great big sauropod, is dumping tons of manure every day on these firm prairies, you begin to ask yourself how that happened and what was the consequence of that. And so also that the same animal must have, because it ate nothing but conifers and ferns, must have had enormous wind problems and things like that.
Sex is a staple part of natural history programs, but no one really knows the mating habits of 10-ton dinosaurs. The filmmakers did their best to show us what it could have been like.
She's going to have to carry at least an extra 10 tons on her back.
It's almost impossible to work out how they got together. So we just did the best we could.
At £37,000 a minute, Walking with Dinosaurs was the most expensive documentary series ever made, but earned millions for the BBC in foreign sales.
I think at the moment over 400 million people have watched it, making it possibly the most popular documentary ever.
At number 20, it's the death of Yugoslavia.
We think the scenery is absolutely superb, and Yugoslavian people are so friendly.
The complex tale of how the state of Yugoslavia disintegrated into a bloody civil war was a daunting subject for a TV series.
We don't film wars. That's what the news does. I mean, what we try to do is the steps that lead to war. It's the story behind the war.
A key ingredient in the series was the exhaustive search for archive footage. When combined with the testimonies of those involved, the story became both comprehensible and gripping.
You want people to get involved in the story and get a sense of being there.
The tale of one critical event which took place in early 1991, before the war began, illustrates just how this documentary made the Balkan conflict clear to the TV audience.
There was an extraordinary meeting in which the Serbs tried to persuade the presidency to vote for sending the troops into Croatia, including the Croatian representative. And then, lo and behold, we discovered that it had been filmed.
Cameras recorded every word.
By the early 90s, everything was on tape. I mean, the quality could be absolute shit, but somebody had filmed it. And we would spool through tapes. And suddenly, there was this chunk of footage that was clearly that meeting.
I don't think anywhere else has anyone filmed a coup d'etat. It was one bit of the government trying to send armed troops against another bit of it.
You have this extraordinary scene where the general is saying, you must decide to go to war. And this poor man, Bogicevic, Bosnian, step back from that and prevent the army from going to war at that moment.
He knew that if the troops went against Croatia, he might be next. And that moment was truly poignant.
Supersize the American way. Throw it down all day, every day. Supersize the American way. Get it back.
So the concept of Supersize Me is that Morgan Spurlock, who's the director and the star, is going to only eat McDonald's food for 30 days. That's breakfast, that's lunch, and that's dinner.
Would it be unreasonably dangerous? Let's find out. I'm ready. Supersize me.
Nobody eats it 3 times a day, you know, every meal every day for 30 days straight. I said, but what the film is very representative of are the health problems that will happen to you in 10, 20, 30, 40 years of eating a diet that is very consistent, you know, with this type of diet.
There's something very honest about Morgan Spurlock. I mean, this is one of the very few films in which you actually see the presenter vomit to camera.
So here I am throwing up out of the car window, you know, going, wow, 28 more days of this, I can't wait, you know. As the diet went on, you know, as I went through the diet and ate more of this food, my body started craving it. Started craving the fat, the sugar, the caffeine, and it got to the point where I couldn't have enough.
In fact, he's a junkie. This stuff is good. He talks about the fact that, you know, what happens when he eats it is he gets a big rush, he feels great, then he has a sugar crash, then he needs to have more. And I think that, in a way, is possibly the most damning thing that comes out of that diet. Not that it's going to make you sick, but the fact that actually you're going to get addicted to it.
You know me, I'm your friend, your main boy, thick and thin. I'm your pusher man. I'm your pusher man.
My cholesterol had jumped up 65 points. My blood pressure was sky high. I was depressed. You know, I was lethargic. I was moody. My sex life fell apart. You know, it was just the problems went on and on and on and on, and it got scary.
I woke up, couldn't breathe.
3 weeks into the experiment, Morgan's doctors were becoming very concerned.
They couldn't believe what was happening to him, and they were saying, look, really, Morgan, you've actually got to stop now. You know, because if you carry on with this, you are going to kill yourself.
Your liver is now like pate.
Surprisingly, McDonald's didn't try to prevent the film being shown or bring legal action against the filmmakers.
Personally, I think it's fantastic, anyone that takes on McDonald's, because they've been so litigious for so many years. I mean, you literally had to be very careful about what you said.
And I remember when it came out in the UK, there were huge full-page ads from McDonald's in the papers.
The ads appeared in several national newspapers and calmly refuted Morgan's accusations.
And I thought it was great that it forced, in a way, McDonald's to rethink and come up with their salads.
Just after the film came out, McDonald's produced an entire range of new products.
They were all saying that it's just coincidental, nothing to do with this movie. But they were worried. I mean, this was a big hit movie. Lots of people went to see it, so they really were concerned.
And I think that these companies, the people who serve this type of high-fat junk food, need to help educate their consumers, help educate their customers. You know, they need to give them the information to make smart choices. And people say, well, it's not their job. So you know what? You feed 17 billion people a year. Yeah, it is your job.
Super Size Me cost just $65,000 to make, but went on to take millions in the box office.
By the end of the year, it will have played in more than 60 countries around the world, have been seen by millions of people. And I get emails and phone calls and letters every day from people who've seen the film who say, since I've seen your movie, I haven't eaten fast food since. I've joined a gym, I've lost 20 pounds. I feel better than I ever have. And to think that a little movie has done that it's remarkable. You know, it's overwhelming, it's humbling, it's gratifying, all at the same time.
At number 18, it's The Nazis, A Warning from History. In the mid-90s, BBC history producer Lawrence Rees attempted something that had never been done before, to make a definitive history of the Nazis.
You're looking at the structures of the Nazi state, the circumstances of the time, and fitting the character of Hitler within that. What you're not doing is making a biography of Hitler and saying that the way to understand this is particularly just through the character of this one individual.
Rees would interview ordinary Germans, ex-Nazis, and victims of the regime. Their testament a timely warning about how fascism can indoctrinate a nation.
Who on earth were these people? Who on earth were the Nazis? They were ordinary people. Does that mean ordinary people like us? Could we be like that?
Ich kann das gar nicht beschreiben. Vor ihrer Tür von so ein paar Irren aufgehangen wird. Ne?
Und Sie waren einer der Irren.
So kann man sagen.
When you're seeing somebody who seems, to all intents and purposes, a decent, nice person, telling you they preferred living under the Nazis to how they live now, well, you've got to think about that a lot. What's going on there?
This massacre of Polish prisoners in Lublin was carried out by the SS in July 1944.
Was hat man zum Beispiel vor Frauen die Kinder umgelegt? Und dann erst die Frauen. Das haben sie auch gemacht.
There are still people alive who are the victims of these outrages, And they are the most, I suppose, pertinent and potent voices still one can have if one's talking about these moments, to have someone saying, I saw it.
Women with children and men with children to the left and the others to the right. You are now in a concentration camp. To go out from here through the chimney.
Night Mail, made in 1936, was one of the first documentaries to use sound. With its music by Benjamin Britten and poetry by W.H. Auden, it tells the story of the overnight train which carried the post from London to Scotland.
News circumstantial, news financial, letters with holiday snaps to enlarge in, letters with faces scrawled in the margin, letters from uncles, cousins and aunts, letters to Scotland from the south of France, letters of condolence to Highlands and Lowlands, notes from overseas to Hebrides, clever, stupid, short and long, the typed and the printed and the spelt all wrong.
Right, cut the chain. At number 16, it's The Family. Reading in the 1970s. The unlikely setting for one of the most talked about and controversial documentary series ever.
You can, I believe, make a film out of anybody. Block off a street, either end, whoever's trapped in the middle. If you can tap into their stories, it will be interesting.
First broadcast in 1974, The Family introduced Fly on the Wall to British television.
The opening title is a soap opera opening title. The Family made the connection between documentary material and its fictional narrative crystal clear.
Up until that time, the life people were living was completely different from the life that was being portrayed in film and television.
One of your false eyelashes just plopped into the cornflake. What?
Whereas when you were with people, they swore,
You shut up and let someone else talk, won't you?
they farted,
Want your dinner?
they screwed.
Oh, shut up.
Which wasn't coming out on film.
You stop being cheeky. I didn't get put in my hair.
The problem was to find a family prepared to tolerate the intrusion by a film crew into their every private moment.
Producer Paul Watson saw at least 80 families before he found the Wilkins of Reading. Husband, wife, 4 children, a daughter-in-law, a grandson and a lodger, all living together in a crowded flat. They were all great characters, but it was the matriarch, Margaret Wilkins, who grabbed everyone's attention.
I'm talking to my daughter. Shut up.
They started to transmit it while they were still filming it, so it became an ordinary family whose intimate washing was being hung out on the line once a week on the telly.
I cannot see the necessity of prying into the private lives of any family, but if it is to be done, then why not choose a family with high ideals, intellectual pursuits, aesthetic appreciation and moral stamina?
Because it'd be boring.
Love them or loathe them, every viewer had an opinion about the Wilkins.
Very shocked in the beginning.
I think it's disgusting.
I think it's dirt.
I think she's lovely. I think she's great.
I think it is the average family.
The BBC said to me, we want another 12. And I said, absolutely no way. No way at all. They're already becoming celebrities.
Right, well, I'm going down.
Proof of the family's fame was the on-off wedding saga of Tom and Marion. Like a soap opera storyline, it had Britain gripped for weeks.
He promised her that when they get a new flat, they will be married. I can't see it coming off, quite honestly.
I want it on television, and to me, that would mean more to me than anything else.
TV wedding of the year.
I like it, I do.
When they did eventually tie the knot in the final episode, the ceremony was mobbed by both paparazzi and public. "26 years later, Marion's marriage hasn't lasted. Margaret and Terry are no longer together, and Heather has her own hair salon.
I didn't like that theme tune.
Oh, I did.
Do you know what people used to do? They used to go. They used to look at you and go. Yeah.
They're still coming to terms with the effect the series had on their lives.
To me, it was a dream came true. We never thought that we could be recognised the next day when we went out in the street.
No. They thought we were actors,
And,
actually.
you know,
They started thinking that you're acting, that you're doing this show.
Yeah.
Like,
Are you the one that played Marion?
Marion, yeah. Are you the one that played Heather? That's what they thought.
Bit scary.
The first reality TV stars were, without question, in terms of impact, the family. There's no doubt about that.
So are the reality programs of today the offspring of Paul Watson's groundbreaking series?
I would not be happy to be called the father of reality television. If I'm the father, they're all just a bunch of little bastards. I mean, I really can't be proud of bringing them into the world.
In 1979, Edward Earl Johnson was accused of killing a white policeman. He'd signed a confession under duress and spent the next 8 years on death row, protesting his innocence. Paul Heyman's multi-award-winning 1987 documentary followed the last 14 days in Johnson's life.
The funny thing is, I think about a future. Now that might seem kind of crazy. Now what future could I possibly have in knowing that I might supposedly be executed in the next 2 weeks?
I got turned down by nearly every state in the United States that had the death penalty. And to cut a long story short, Mississippi were the one people that had me in. And it took me two or three visits to get the access there. It was so important to get it right and put your all into making this something special. But at the same time, you sort of hated yourself, I remember. You felt guilty about being there.
In a way, the film crew was a wonderful thing because it attached a surreality to the whole process. Edward couldn't believe they were going to kill him. I didn't believe they were going to kill him. And actually having the cameras there, you kept thinking someone's going to say cut.
In a fair world, you're going to win, but the world isn't always unfair, so we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed and keep praying.
As a young lawyer, Clive Stafford Smith was working in Mississippi with death row prisoners and became a key part of the documentary.
On the first day of filming, the guy that ran death row said, "Funny you're making a film about this guy. He's the one guy that didn't do it."
They just already assuming that they're going to kill me.
And then the prison chaplain, the prison nurse, the prison psychiatrist, Don Cabana, the man that ran the prison, said, "This guy probably didn't do it." You know, your heart went out for this guy. But we all became his friends, the entire team, and it was so difficult, particularly in the last 3 days when we realised that there wasn't a chance of changing their minds in any way.
So we are prepared to carry out this execution at 12:01 tomorrow morning or as soon after that time as possible.
It's very hard. I mean, it's not often that one is put in the position of having to tell someone that they're going to die. It's very hard. I remember just walking along thinking, what on earth are the words you're meant to say?
I left just before he's taken into the gas chamber, which I felt was inappropriate to film.
One of the most powerful moments in it is where the filmmaker, Paul Heyman, says goodbye at the end.
One second, we want to say goodbye to you. Our hearts are with you, and we're still praying for you. Take it easy, man. Goodbye.
We all said our goodbyes and we all hugged him, the crew and myself, and left.
With that little gesture, the whole outside world comes in. And it also says, we, the film crew, are so powerfully affected by this that we've dropped our neutrality. And we're on your side, mate.
At 12:06 a.m., Wednesday, May 20th, Edward Earl Johnson was executed in the lethal gas chamber here at the Mississippi State Penitentiary.
That was the first person I'd ever seen die, and it was in the gas chamber, and it really angered me. I was very angry right after it happened.
When the family asked me why, all I could say was, it's a sick world.
I was furious, and because I'd just come from seeing the family, and I'd had to tell his mother and his grandmother that they'd just taken their beloved son out and killed him, and they never believed it was going to happen.
I'll be glad to entertain any questions you may have.
After this case, prison warden Don Cabana radically changed his stance on capital punishment.
he then became a tremendously powerful advocate against the death penalty, because there's nothing quite like getting in an argument with someone and that person saying, well, look, I've killed people. I was there. I was the one in charge of the execution, and I'm going to tell you what it's all about.
There's a whole generation of television viewers for whom it's one of the most important films they ever saw.
It changed my way of thinking about the death penalty. Not that I'd ever really thought about it. It made you think about it, and then made you think, can this be right?
And it's that quality that documentary filmmakers strive to achieve. Maybe once or twice in their lifetime, you get somewhere near it, or you get to it.
The 1972 Munich Olympics were to be the games of peace and joy, erasing forever the memory of Nazi-controlled Berlin of 1936. But a combination of inadequate security and profound unpreparedness led instead to 21 hours of terror. As the world looked on in disbelief, an extreme separatist group of Palestinians calling themselves Black September entered the sleeping quarters of the athletes from Israel, killing 2 of the team members and holding the rest hostage. One day in September details exactly how the Germans botched every attempt to rescue the surviving athletes.
Panorama and people over the years had done little things about aspects of the story, but no one had ever sat down and thought, right, I'm going to tell this story from the beginning to the end of what happened in Munich and, and leave no stone unturned.
There were so many unanswered questions about what had happened. This was such a major event in the world at that time. It was probably the most shocking and enormous terrorist attack that had happened in the world up till that point. It took us so long to do, and it was such it was so hard because you were working again, trying to get stuff out of Mossad and trying to get stuff out of the Palestinian Secret Service, trying to get stuff out of the Germans, who were the worst of all for not wanting to talk about their past.
The 9 surviving athletes were taken to the airport as hostages, where a rescue attempt by the German police went horribly wrong.
They've now said that there were 11 hostages. 2 were killed in their rooms yesterday morning. 9 were killed at the airport tonight. They're all gone.
With such an emotive subject, the film was accused of being biased by those on both sides of the story.
Inevitably, MacDonald was going to be criticised for being pro-Zionist, pro-Palestinian. The truth of the matter was he was pro-neutral. He did a good job. My view was that he did a brilliant job.
One Day in September won the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature in March 1999. In the volatile political climate of South Africa in the early 90s, the Afrikaner Resistance Movement, or AWB, and its neo-Nazi leader, Eugene Terre-Blanche, were a violent and provocative presence. In his film The Leader, His Driver and the Driver's Wife, Nick Broomfield used his trademark antagonistic approach to get under the skin of this wannabe despot.
I was just calling up to see if it might be possible to interview the leader today.
Broomfield and his crew made for Venderstrop in the Transvaal, heartland of the AWB. Using his techniques of studied nonchalance and aggressive charm, Broomfield set out to get his man.
Put it down.
Switch off.
Switch off.
I came from a tradition when people said switch the camera off, you switched it off in respect for them. But I learned very quickly from Nick to keep it running.
Stop. Stop.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I always remember Barry saying, I always feel the camera's a battering ram. It's not really like a camera, and people keep attacking it.
If I switched the camera off feeling in danger, that was the moment Nick wanted.
Do you want to ask a few questions?
Broomfield's portrait of Terre-Blanche is a ruthless send-up. He turns a frightening fascist bully into a figure of fun, antagonizing him at every turn.
Apparently he just doesn't like your face today.
I felt it was much more important to make a black comedy about the white right
than it was to make a very serious film that gave them a sort of seriousness that they didn't really deserve.
The whole chase is about really winding him up and saying, you know, we want to interview you, but I'm not sure when or what we're going to talk about.
After several false starts, the interview with the leader finally arrived. Broomfield, however, was intent on mischief.
We were kind of ordered to be at Blanche's office at 12 o'clock. I think Nick said, shall we stop for a cup of tea? And we said, I think we need a cup of tea. And we all stopped and had a cup of tea.
Barry had already been attacked a couple of times with the camera. It was like already saying his prayers. Hello? Rita was there, I think we should go now, Nick. He's going to be so furious.
Finally, we get to the interview, and of course, we're late.
Mr. DeBlanche, I'm very sorry that we were 10 minutes late.
I'm not making a movie. I'm not making a film. I'm preparing my people for a fight.
He was a man with enormous ego, and I knew being 10 minutes late for an interview with him would provoke an outrageous reaction.
I'm very sorry that we were 10 minutes late.
The interview was all about why we were 10 minutes late.
Stop it. I'm not accepting your apologizing. You were late.
He kept wanting to get Nick to ask him questions about his politics, and Nick kept encouraging him to talk about being late rather than, you know, what the AWB stood for.
I think we were actually just, were we getting some tea?
Well, that's good. Yes.
I think we were getting some tea.
Tea and dinner is better than a man.
The climax of the film occurs at a showpiece AWB rally.
Suddenly Ted Blanche realises what this guy is up to and turns really nasty.
You are just taking over. Who the hell do you think you are?
We were just trying to get a passport shot.
Listen, I'm not working for your bloody company, okay?
There are some terrifying moments. Ted Blanche sort of berates him with his riding crop. And then he ends up calling Barry Ackroyd, the cameraman, like a monkey in a tree. And
he's hanging on that camera like a monkey in a bloody tree.
He's a monkey. You are a monkey. He definitely is.
He just made them look ridiculous. And there's no more effective and more damaging propaganda, political propaganda, than to be made to look ridiculous.
Death on the Rock was a controversial and BAFTA award-winning episode of Thames Television's current affairs strand this week. When 3 active members of the IRA were shot in Gibraltar by the SAS, the programme investigated the suspicion that there was a covert government strategy to eliminate known terrorists, the so-called shoot-to-kill policy.
Was very careful to set up what that IRA cell had been intending to do. They'd been intending to plant a gigantic bomb and blow up a whole load of civilians. And yet it then went on to say, did the SAS have the law on their side?
The programme interviewed 4 witnesses to the killing, who all said that the 3 victims appeared to be shot without warning.
Death on the Rock, by seeming to agree with some of the Republican critique of the way in which British security forces went about their job, infuriated the government to a kind of level of anger with television makers, which I don't think we've ever seen before or since.
If you ever get trial by television or guilt by accusation, that day, freedom dies.
The programme makers were vilified in the right-wing press, as were the witnesses they found.
It's the old story of shoot the messenger, you know. If you make a programme which is less than popular or doesn't fit the political agenda of those who lead us, then the first thing you expect is that you take the flak.
The pressure put on journalists at that time was simply, you know, a challenge to free speech. And ITV, it's a great and proud moment for ITV.
The government inquiry a year later exonerated Thames Television of any impropriety, but the allegations of a covert SAS shoot-to-kill policy were never proved.
It didn't mean that this week we're anything other than courageous in actually tackling it in that way.
It is real old-school journalism at its best, really. It's very clear storytelling.
A very, very brave programme to make about very difficult and dangerous times.
At number 11, it's Hoop Dreams. Hoop Dreams followed teenagers William Gates and Arthur Agee as they chased their dream of leaving the Chicago ghetto and finding fame and fortune in professional basketball.
The game
you know, really is sort of a metaphor in a sense for the American dream.
I think what really makes the film work, for those who don't like basketball, is this overlay of American society.
Believe it or not, the original proposal for Hoop Dreams was to do something that was going to be a half-hour long, that we'd shoot for about a month.
But the film ended up by following the boys and their families for 5 years, and the resulting documentary was nearly 3 hours long. Filming began when the boys were just 14 and showing early promise on the basketball court.
That's something I think about all the time, you know, playing in the NBA.
My dream, my passion about the NBA was life within itself. I mean, I slept, ate, drink it morning, noon, night.
Both boys came from poor families, but were offered scholarships, which set them on the way to their dream. William played in the high-profile college league, struggling with academic and financial pressures, but his career was ultimately cut short by serious knee injuries. Arthur's rebellious personality and turbulent home life stacked the odds even higher against him. His family existed on welfare and his father was a drug addict.
Increasingly, this playground court has become a place to buy and sell drugs.
Many of the significant sort of defining relationship moments between Arthur and his dad happen on the basketball court.
That's 34. That's 32. That's 34. He hit nothing else. I did.
There was a lot of aggravation and animosity between me and my dad then.
I'm older now. Yeah. Ain't no con game going on no more.
And the father's journey from being a crackhead to trying to clean himself up by, 3 or 4 years later, that's amazing.
Wasn't no 7-step program, wasn't no miracle thing or nothing like that. He decided I'm through with it.
Arthur also had a successful college career, but never reached the high expectations of his coach or the hallowed National League. Basketball did change William and Arthur's lives, but not in the way they expected.
They were right, because basketball was their ticket out of the ghetto, but it wasn't into millions of dollars in the NBA, it was simply into college.
Arthur left the ghetto for the suburbs and now gives motivational speeches for schools. William became a pastor at a community center and still lives in his old neighborhood.
Even now, 10 years later, there's a new generation of people seeing the movie that are talking about it. I've even heard of some schools using it as part of their curriculum. I mean, to me, that's amazing.
There hasn't been a better documentary in America since I've been a film critic than Hoop Dreams.
If you had to do a time capsule about how it was to be young and black in America in this period, this is the thing you put in a time capsule.
Faking It takes a mentor, some experts, 4 weeks, and some TV magic to realize the ambitions of one willing contributor.
This is Roger.
If your name's not Dan, you're not coming in.
What the fuck are you gonna do about this?
Listen, geezer. Oh, that's shit. I don't know. Whatever.
But this modern-day Pygmalion is no simple aspirational journey. In it, naval officers become drag queens, country toffs become urban bouncers, and classical cellists become club DJs.
I'm not really clear exactly about house music.
Go! Over the course of a month of intensive training, the would-be faker gets to find out everything about a strange new world, and even more about themselves.
That's good.
Faking It is the most upbeat, positive documentary that there is, because it's all the time saying, look, this is what people are capable of. If you're given the right circumstances, the right encouragement, then they are capable of extraordinary things. It's about, do they find inner confidence in themselves to do things that they didn't think they could do?
The climax of every Faking It is the moment when the faker attempts to fool the experts.
I can pull this off.
This should be played at high volume.
Well, I'm impressed.
Sorry, if you haven't got any idea, I'm not letting you in yet. The imposter is Alex.
No.
All three of them didn't get shit. None of them.
I
think when programs like Faking It and big factual entertainment shows and reality TV become more and more popular, a lot of commentators think that's the lowest common denominator. But actually, I think that it's because audiences are more and more sophisticated.
First shown in 2000, Faking It was an immediate hit with viewers, and its success began the current boom in swap format TV shows. But this approach to storytelling has its critics. Is it really documentary?
I don't think anything should be called a documentary in which the situation that is being documented has been confected by the producers.
There is a slot to be reached in each of those films in their development. You know, there must be a row before the first commercial break or within the first few minutes.
It's very easy to understand why television has liked it, but to say that it has any deeper significance is delusional.
At number 9, it's When We Were Kings. When We Were Kings is the Oscar-winning story of perhaps the most famous boxing match ever, the so-called Rumble in the Jungle between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman.
We're gonna rumble in the jungle.
I always felt that this film was so much more than a film about a fight.
It is such a great story about a man accomplishing what everybody thought was impossible.
President Mobutu of Zaire put up an unprecedented $10 million to host the heavyweight title fight in 1974.
The greatest sporting event in the history of the world.
Alongside the boxing, a music festival was organized, which captured the cream of American black talent. American director Leon Gast captured both these events and the surrounding media circus on film. But financial and contractual problems led to the film being shelved for almost 20 years.
We shot it in 1974. It was released in 1997.
The 300,000 feet of film sat unseen until Leon struck a deal with producer Taylor Hackford to back the project. The original footage was supplemented with newly shot interviews.
We then spent 4 weeks re-editing the film, adding Spike Lee, adding Norman Mailer, George Plimpton, and it was 20 years later, and we could look back on that music and that style.
You know, that sort of 70s archive that has a sort of texture to it that is just fabulously compelling. You know, the style is great, the afros, flares.
There was just a moment in the 1970s when there were real sporting giants, and this film captured it perfectly.
All of these great American champions of sport and music going back to the home run.
There's all a sense of black celebration, but this is happening in the context of a repressive, dictatorial, murderous regime.
But the excesses of Mobutu were conveniently forgotten, while the eyes of the world were on Zaire for the fight.
Ali, Boumaier, Ali, Boumaier, Ali, Boumaier.
Ali had made himself the people's champion, and they all wanted him to beat the big, ugly gorilla.
We gonna get it on because we don't get along. I don't like him. He talks too much.
When they finally did get it on, Ali eventually triumphed over the younger and fitter Foreman in what many regard as the fight of the century.
Ali had his right cocked for one more punch, but he never threw it. It was he didn't want to ruin the aesthetic of this man going down with a clumsy punch on the way down.
It's the crowning event in his career as a fighter.
You can't help but feel fantastic after that. You know, you after that movie, I want to go out and run up the steps like Rocky. You know, I want to jump up and down on the Capitol and be like, "Whoa, I did it!" You know, I mean, it is a film that really just inspires you.
Michael Moore, total ass, slime ball, and outrageous in his lies about my family.
Michael Moore has created a new breed of commercially successful cinema documentary, with Fahrenheit 9/11 grossing $220 million worldwide. But mere financial success wasn't enough for Moore. This time he'd made a film to bring down the government.
The message of the day is we're here to have one big party to celebrate the beginning of the end of the Republican Party.
In Fahrenheit 9/11, Moore addresses the US response to the attack on the Twin Towers in 2001, the so-called War on Terror. He concludes that America was led into a pointless and illegal war in Iraq and puts the blame at the door of President Bush.
With everything going wrong, he did what any of us would do. He went on vacation.
Well, the amazing thing about Moore was he had the imagination to make this very bold film, and because it was so popular, it had to be shown, and it had a big impact on the public mind. You can't hold people down forever. You can try, but you can't.
But in the 2004 election, Michael Moore was unable to achieve his stated aim: regime change.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
At number 7, it's Life on Earth. 3 years in the making, involving 1.5 million miles of travel and featuring some of the most beautiful, breathtaking and ambitious photography then seen on television. Life on Earth was the first natural history blockbuster.
Life on Earth tried to tell the history of life, starting from the very simplest things, which first appeared on Earth, and how other things appeared thereafter.
And here, weathering out near the top of this cliff, is the skull of one of the most dramatic of all dinosaurs.
I mean, we were lucky there. You know, we were the first people to do the story of evolution with animals in that way.
And the camera crews that he used, they were astonishing. Those guys got the most amazing shots, the sort of images that people had never seen before in natural history programs.
In fact, you had absolutely crystal clear pictures of sort of a bird feeding in the middle of the Amazon jungle. I mean, absolutely extraordinary, vivid images.
In such detail, with such exquisite beauty brought onto the screen, right into your face, things that you could never ever dream of seeing. And I think it was that made his programmes stand out above everybody else's.
I think the difference was that David was presenting a whole lot of location pieces which told a story. And the tricky thing, or the different thing he was doing then, was that he would walk out of Australia into Africa, and he'd walk out of Africa into Costa Rica. So he was actually walking across the world.
One of the most memorable scenes in the series is where David Attenborough encounters a group of mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
I moved towards a gorilla group that was sitting just on the other side of a ravine and crawled up, when one of the baby gorillas there came and sat on my feet and started on doing my shoelaces.
The scene that still looks exciting now, when he had to be submissive. He lowered his head and carried on talking amongst these gorillas in a whisper.
There is more meaning and mutual understanding in exchanging a glance with a gorilla than any other animal I know.
There's extraordinary sort of electricity about this scene, this encounter. This was our teacher, our representative out there, who is still sharing this precious knowledge.
Most of the time I've been watching television, David Attenborough's been on it.
OK, well, standing by.
Sounds ready. Do you want a rehearsal?
To me, David Attenborough was always someone who was rather like a tutor to school, who'd taken a special interest in you, and he'd taken you aside and was trying to impart knowledge with his enthusiasm.
I was lucky enough to dive with a group of whale experts who knew just how to get close to these magnificent creatures.
He's a very learned man, and he comes over with an amazing amount of gravitas. I think when David Attenborough says something, you believe it.
This is the largest frog in the world.
It's not easy stuff to put across, but David makes it look easy.
He took on this role as a sort of communicator for the planet.
He has some extraordinary elixir which he must take to keep him looking almost exactly the same at sort of whatever he is now, sort of 60, 70, as he was at 20, 25.
Sweet potato.
The privilege of making these documentaries and going to all the most exciting places that you could possibly think of is enormous and rather humbling, really.
soon as it started, I knew this documentary was something very, very special.
It's just so poignant to watch it.
I would have thought that the people who chose The Boy Whose Skin Fell Off chose it for the same reason that I would go along with it, in that it made me cry.
Emmy award-winning film The Boy Whose Skin Fell Off was the story of the last few months in the life of Johnny Kennedy.
The documentary opens with this body in a chair and a voiceover coming in, and it's him talking about it.
Welcome, everybody. My name's Johnny Kennedy.
And the mind goes, hang on a minute, how can this be?
And then the whole narrative was almost the voice of a dead man in a way.
And that's me in the box. I have come back in spirit. I'll tell you the story of my life and my death.
Johnny Kennedy had a genetic condition called epidermolysis bullosa, which meant that, in layman's terms, his skin didn't stick to his flesh, so that any knocks or bumps, and the skin would just kind of come off. He started life with a fair amount of skin, and over the course of his life kind of shed a lot of it, so he was swathed in bandages.
Johnny Kennedy was 36 when the filming began. He had recently been diagnosed with cancer.
So I've gone on all this time with a body like mine, and they're going to get cancer like this. If anybody says, oh, he was just a whinge, aye.
He'd had enough, basically. You know, he'd had 36 years of unimaginable pain. And also he believed in the afterlife, so he believed that death was a release, he'd be moving on.
I believe in a God, and that's it.
So there was a kind of real point to filming him. It wasn't just, oh, let's go and watch somebody die.
I was always a crap singer.
He never asked you to feel sorry for him, and his incredible sense of humour made it probably the best documentary I've ever seen in terms of the emotions that it stirred in me.
One of the funniest and most touching scenes in the film is Johnny's encounter with glamour model Nell McAndrew.
Have we got it this time? No, take it again. Oh, we could be here. See, right down that T-shirt on she leant over.
He won everyone's hearts with his personality. Very, very funny, really cheeky.
The guy's a pro.
It was really awful filming Johnny dying. But that was the deal. He granted access to his life and death, and my part of the deal was to see it through to his death.
There is a point to everything, and we're here to learn, and it's just a learning curve, and we'll move on. And this is just a shell. It's just I've got a dodgy shell.
I don't know what the symbolism of the tiger.
The tiger, if you have listened to the Queen, I'm having a good time, like a tiger defying the laws of gravity. That's where that's come from, and the tiger is the strength.
You laugh all the way through this film, right through to the end when you see that he's put the baked bean can symbol on the end of his coffin. Is there a reason? No, I just want people to talk about it.
I know inside that there's more to life than this mortal coil.
I like the fact that it avoided being manipulative and pulling on the heartstrings, but actually by being matter-of-fact, it pulled on my heartstrings even more.
I may see some of you around. Maybe it's in the next life, or maybe sitting on a cloud, who knows. I'm away now.
In the 18 months since Johnny's death, £500,000 has been raised for the EB charity Deborah. What was once a relatively obscure condition now has a high profile. And this February, the Johnny Kennedy Memorial Appeal was launched for people with EB in the Northeast. All thanks to a documentary.
Usually every single day there's a stranger who'll come up to me and say, I saw the boy whose skin fell off, which I think is just tremendous because it's really got through to people and it's got the message out, the message that people needed to be aware of this condition.
One of the saddest things I've ever heard anybody say was when Johnny said he felt that he was a waste of space. I'm a waste of space, I'm a burden on the family, I'm a burden on society. What am I here for? And I just wish he was here to see. Sorry. Just what a wonderful legacy he has left.
Started out making a film about professional children's birthday party clowns in New York City, and then after working with David Friedman, who's the #1 guy in New York who does that, I discovered after about 3 months of working with him that he had a secret story.
Well, I'll bet you. David's secret story was that 10 years earlier, his father and brother had been arrested on multiple charges of child abuse. A filmmaker's dream come true. The Friedmans had documented their lives before and after the incident with home movies.
Did you do what they said you did? I never touched a kid. I never saw my father touch a kid. Good.
You just are astonished that this is a story of real people. These things, they really did these things really happened to them. And also, constantly in that film, you say, how on earth did he get this material?
You can go into the house. You know, the family brings you into their own house with their own camera.
Can't you put your anger aside for 1 minute?
I cannot put my anger aside about you. You have been nothing but hateful, hostile, and angry ever since this began.
But the film makes no conclusions. It's left to the viewer to decide if Arnold and Jesse Friedman are monstrous child molesters or the victims of railroading and hysteria.
You know, I went down a path thinking I had a sense of what was going on, and suddenly I was shocked to find that the person I was talking to had told me something that wasn't true, you know.
I mean, when real people are in a documentary and you know someone is lying, that's gripping.
It's really two kinds of documentary. First of all, the documentary that the family made about itself, and then we're witnesses to that. So it's two layers of documentary. And I think it really points the way forward for documentary because so much of our lives is now documented.
Without any doubt at all, we're going to see films in the next 10, 20 years which make extensive use of home footage, and they'll always have the power to surprise us.
At #4, it's the world at war.
I think the most impressive thing about it is the way that you really do get a sense of the world going up in flames. The surging opening bars of the incredible Carl Davis score.
This is Oradour-sur-Glane in France.
Olivier's voice is the very soul of
that went on around the world to find film, to find the survivors of various events and get them to talk about it.
The World at War was the first and last opportunity for some of these voices to be heard.
When I wanted to sign up, the man in charge asked me, were you a soldier? I said, yes, indeed. Well, just as there was an elite guard in the Kaiser's time, there is an elite guard now in the new movement, and that is the SS.
The idea that you could get the enemy and get inside their hearts and minds as well. It's fantastic.
Hi, boys and girls, ready to get started?
I think documentary is the most potent and most powerful child of the television age. At its least, it changes people's minds. At its best, it can change their lives.
At Columbine High School in April 1999, 2 teenage boys shot dead 12 of their fellow students and 1 teacher. It was an act that shocked America and caused many to question just how such a massacre could happen. Documentary maker Michael Moore's response was to make a black comedy that dared to question one of America's most beloved icons, the gun.
M16. At home.
Yep.
Yeah.
The idea that you can freely buy and own a gun, it seems to be, for a certain particularly right-wing segment of American society, a crucial right. And Michael Moore was investigating, well, maybe if these kids hadn't had such easy access to these guns and bullets, the massacre would never have happened. And it made for a amazing and intriguing documentary.
There's wackos out there.
I like to be entertained. You know, I like things to be funny. I like things to be a riot, you know, while I'm watching it.
Bowling for Columbine fires every weapon in the Moore armory. A rich mix of agitprop, archive, animation and argument, the film refuses to accept easy answers about why so many Americans are killed or wounded by guns every year.
Violent movies,
South Park,
video games,
television, entertainment, Satan, cartoons, doom, society,
toy guns, drugs,
Marilyn Manson.
In Bowling for Columbine, Moore pursued those he held responsible for the easy availability of guns in America, like Charlton Heston, spokesman of the pro-gun National Rifle Association.
Thank you for supporting your organization. From my cold, dead hands.
But for some commentators, Moore's aim wasn't true.
His approach is far too scattershot. There's no kind of intellectual organisation there. There's no overarching principle. He just kind of attacks whatever target is to hand.
And also news, students who survived the Columbine massacre are in town. They are very angry with Kmart.
We're here to see Mr. Conway.
A big part of the kind of range of tools that he uses to tell his stories is the confrontational approach to people, to authority, that doesn't want him to be there.
Okay, turn it off, yeah.
This overweight guy from Flint, Michigan, who, you know, goes out there to find things out and to help people.
They were shot at Columbine in the massacre with bullets from Kmart.
We came a long way. It's made a lot of people braver, I think, about wanting to do documentaries which have a point of view again.
How many people are killed by guns each year? In Germany, 381. In Australia, 65. In the United States, 11,127.
Columbine went on to win an Oscar in 2003 and is credited with single-handedly bringing about the big screen documentary revival.
The war will never end.
The film made Michael Moore into a powerful political figure. As he collected his many awards around the world, Moore was already taking aim at his next big target, the US president.
And what better way than to use September 11th and try and string out this so-called war on terrorism? As Bush says, the war will never end.
What a wonderful
Wow. Sweet.
At number 2, it's Touching the Void. After reading the story of Joe Simpson's nightmare climbing accident in the Andes, director Kevin MacDonald decided that the best way of telling the story in film would be a combination of interviews with the two men involved and reconstructions of actual events.
So in a sense the book was only the beginning. What we then had to do was to go back and meet and interview the real characters, Simon Yates and Joe Simpson.
I'd actually always thought that that was the way to make the film, because Hollywood has made such crap mountaineering films. And so I thought, well, let's do this.
The story began in 1985, when 25-year-old Joe and Simon, ambitious young mountaineers, set off to scale a remote and treacherous peak in the Peruvian Andes. They reached the summit, but shortly after starting their descent, an accident turned their expedition into a desperate fight for survival.
I've broken my leg.
Oh, immediately. I mean, I just doom, really. I thought, oh, God, you know, like we're stuffed.
we're going to be doing well if either of us get out of this now.
Joe was stranded with a broken leg on the end of a rope attached to Simon, leaving neither man with a chance of surviving.
Sooner or later, I was going to be pulled from the mountain.
But then Simon did the unthinkable.
Woof.
He had to cut the rope to save his own life.
People think that, you know, he's a baddie because he cut the rope, and you know, Simon and I know that that's just a load of balls, basically. You know, Simon had spent 11.5 hours trying to save my life. You know, it actually at huge risk to his own life.
And I don't think anybody who's seen the film would think that he did the wrong thing.
Having thought his friend had died, Simon returned to the base camp. But incredibly, Joe had survived the fall and managed not only to crawl out of the icy crevasse with a broken leg, but over a period of 3 days, inched down the mountain and back to camp.
The whole film was incredibly authentic. It was never made in a studio.
The close-up shots of the reconstruction of their ordeal were filmed in the Alps with 2 young climbers. But for the wide shots, Joe and Simon travelled back to Peru to the actual location of their climb to recreate it for the cameras.
Reenacting some of the crawling was just very weird.
It sounds like sort of cruel, unusual torture, doesn't it? But we would sort of get him to reenact something that happened to him. The camera would be, you know, a quarter of a mile away up on a cliff somewhere, and he'd be down on his own in the middle of the rocky moraines, you know, pretending that his leg was broken.
You know, part of you's going, well, this might all be a hallucination, and these cameramen and this book and all that's happened in the last, what was then 18 years, had never happened, and I would plink back into reality and be crawling around in 1985. When I got home, I was still pretty messed up for about 6 weeks. I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and stuff, and my doctor actually said it was grossly negligent to send somebody back and to make them reconstruct where they were dying in the same clothes, you know. But then again, I was the one who agreed to it.
Simon also found the film disturbing and had misgivings about the whole project.
Simon, after we came back from Peru, decided that was it. He didn't want anything else to do with it. He'd had a miserable time in Peru. He didn't like film crews. He hated me. I've heard he's seen the film a few times. Initially, he wasn't that fond of it, but I think now he doesn't mind it.
Cinema audiences around the world certainly didn't mind the film. The simple and direct style and universal messages made it into a box office phenomenon. In 1964, ITV's World in Action brought together 20 children from different social strata to examine the inequalities of the British class system.
Give me a child until he is 7, and I will give you the man.
I might go to Oxford. I may want to go to a university, but I don't know which one yet. What does university mean? I'm going to work in Woolworths.
Some of these same children were revisited every 7 years to track their progress. And this year they shared their lives once again in the 7th programme, 49 Up. Michael Apted was a young researcher on the original show and has continued to be involved in every episode over the past 42 years.
When we started this series in '64, you know, it was only ever going to be one-off film just to look at a certain period of English history. It was never an attempt. No one ever had the idea of let's keep going with this, let's document people's lives. And I suppose that would have sort of been unthinkable, you know, planning out a life's work.
Let's have a ride on your bicycle.
London cabbie Tony Walker has been involved in every show and has become a minor celebrity as a result.
I pick a lot of people up, and on various occasions they put their finger at my face and say, "Oh, I know you. You're the guy on that programme, aren't you?" And it's a funny scenario because normally it's the cabbie that says, "Here, have a guess who I had in the back of the cab."
His wife, Debbie, who also drives a cab, has been part of the show herself since 28 Up. Tony and Debbie have had the ups and downs of their marriage laid bare for the cameras for the past 21 years.
I've been in positions, you know, and well, it's hard to say in front of Debbie, but it's true. It's tempting. You take the bait.
It's still just as hard when you're sitting at home when it actually goes out. And you know everyone you know is going to be sitting watching it.
7 Up is probably everyone's favourite documentary, and the reason for that is that it does something very innovative, which is it tracks people through time.
You watch it, and you watch people change, you watch their hair disappear, you watch their faces go red, you watch their lives go up, they watch their lives go down, you watch their opinions go from left wing to right wing to left wing, you see their ambitions crushed, you see them succeed, you see them fail.
It's a great tribute to Michael Apted and the people that worked with him, that they've managed to persuade the children that were selected, so many of them, to keep on taking part in the programme every 7 years.
They always expect the call from me, and then they start to think, oh my God, what have I done in the last 7 years? What am I going to tell her?
The phone call has always been there. The 7-year cycle, it comes round. It is the 7-year itch.
Another participant that has been part of every programme is Neil, who became one of the most talked about and fascinating stories of the series.
When I grow up, I want to be an astronaut. But if I can't be an astronaut, I think I'll be a coach driver.
What happens in a life that turns a 7-year-old, full of life and hope and joy, into somebody desperate and broken by the side of a loch, homeless in Scotland?
Can you think what you'd like to be doing in the year 2000?
And that's a horrible question. I tend to think the most likely answer is that I'll be wandering homeless around the streets of London.
We finished the interview and we were both in tears, and he turned to me and he said, "It's every parent's nightmare, isn't it?" And I said yes.
Bruce, another character in the series, brought Neil to London and helped him to re-establish himself. Within the space of 7 years, Neil had gone from homelessness to being elected as a member of his local council. It's stories like this that have made the 7 Up series more than just a television show, but part of the fabric of life in Britain.
It's a noble use of film. We see that film and it helps us understand what it is to be alive.
Have you ever seen it so real in anything else in the factual area? I don't think so.
I'd like to keep it going because I just think, having gone so far, why stop? As long as enough of them are prepared to stay aboard, I think, it's just going to get more and more interesting.
I know I'd prefer to be alone, really.
I can't say I don't want to get married.
So how's married life been since I last saw you?
Shocking.
I want to be a jockey when I grow up. Yeah, I want to be a jockey when I grow up.
Have you got a girlfriend?
Nope.
I look at it on a personal note, is that when I look at it, and I'm not here no more, and my kids, I should say, look at it, well, I know that they've got some legacy that I've left.
The best insight into the state of this nation in the last half of the 20th century in any medium.
It's an extraordinary tale of one woman's courage and passion during World War II. Cate Blanchett stars as Charlotte Gray tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Up next, 30 years old and only just discovered, Pete and Dud, The Lost Tapes.